Well, the holidays are winding down, and it's time to start preparing ourselves for the new year and all of our New Year's resolutions. And to prepare our hearts, we're going to catch up on our last Torah portions, which have an important lesson, an appropriate lesson for us. So, welcome to this week's Shabbat Shalom devotional, when I seek to share just a little inspiration and bring a little peace to the close of your very busy week. Well, we paused our Torah reading the last 2 weeks in order to deal with the subjects of Hanukkah and then Christmas. So this week we're going to play catch up. We're going to cover 10 whole chapters from Genesis chapter 37 to chapter 47. And this is the story of Joseph. We all know the story. We heard it in Sunday school. We heard it when we were children. But Joseph had some dreams, and which it seemed to say that he was going to be greater than his brothers and even his father. And this caused a lot of jealousy and hatred and bitterness. So his brothers ended up selling Joseph into slavery. He's taken to Egypt, and there he is bought as a slave by Potiphar, and he's working in Potiphar's house, where he is then falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, and he's put into prison. But yet in prison, he begins to interpret dreams. And so next thing we know, Potiphar has a dream, and he needs, or I should say Pharaoh has a dream, and he needs it interpreted. So they call upon Joseph. And this is the beginning of Joseph's rise to power. Well, he begins to prepare Egypt during 7 years of plenty for 7 years of famine that God has showed him are ahead. And sure enough, the famine begins, and his brothers come down from Canaan in order to buy grain. He plays with them, and then finally he reveals to them he is their lost brother, Joseph. And he tells them to bring their father Jacob, which they do, and he comes to live in the land of Egypt. So there's so many lessons, so many things we could talk about in that story. So I want to focus on a lesson at the very end of the story of this week's reading. It's that Joseph knew the dangers of the pagan Egyptian society. He had grown up in it, and he knew that for the survival of his family, they needed to be apart from the Egyptians. And he knew that they must stay out of the influence of this society. They should not assimilate into it and be lost as a people. So he tells them that when they go before Pharaoh, what to say. And we're going to read it in chapter 46, verse 33 and 34. So it shall be when Pharaoh calls you and says, "What is your occupation?" that you shall say, "Your servant's occupation has been with livestock from our youth, even till now, both we and also our fathers, that you may dwell in the land of Goshen. For every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians." Now this is interesting. Joseph is telling them to claim to be a people that are an abomination or are loathsome to the Egyptians. He wanted to keep his family separate from the Egyptians. Yes, this separateness would place them into the very fertile land of Goshen, where they were going to prosper. But verse 34 says that Joseph didn't do it for the fertile land. He told them to do it because they would be looked down upon by the Egyptians. They would be set apart and kept separate. Remember, we talked earlier about how that holy means to be set apart for God's purposes. Here, the Israelites were set apart for His purpose. Otherwise, they may have assimilated. They might have intermarried. They may have lost their faith and been swallowed up in the people of Egypt. Joseph did not just feed his people and save them that way, but he also placed them in a fertile area. But most importantly, he kept them separate and apart for their survival. Now, as we look ahead at 2023, I think we need to ask ourselves, are we seeking affirmation and inclusion by a godless and sinful world? Or are we happy to be looked down upon and to live separately, where we can obey and follow our God and live according to his righteousness? These are good questions as we're facing a new year, and something to ponder over this weekend. And with that, I'm going to wish you a Shabbat Shalom.